You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin.
The first time I met Marla, I was supposed to be fixing the AC. I worked maintenance at the university, which meant I spent my days crawling through ducts and up ladders, far from the sleek world of academia or the cocktail party that was happening on the rooftop. But, well, I wasn't fixing ACs that night. I was holding my glass, feeling way out of place among the professors and administrators, when she walked up. Marla wasn't like the others. She had this energy, bright, sharp, magnetic. She was a school principal, but she talked about her job like it was a launch pad. Plans to turn her underperforming school around, make a name for herself in district leadership, all with that sparkle in her eye that made you believe she could do it. She laughed when I told her what I did, but it wasn't cruel. More like she saw something interesting under the surface. I guess you could say I'm a tinkerer, I told her, the way I always said it when someone asked what I did outside of my job. I've been working on a water purification valve. Just got my licensing. It's nothing huge, but could be something. She raised an eyebrow. Ambitious, huh? I shrugged. It's a start. Her laugh was low and genuine. I like that. We kept talking, me explaining how it worked, her telling me more about her dreams. And I remember, vividly, how she made me feel like I mattered. Not like a guy who fixed toilets and boilers, but like I had a future. We stayed there, chatting, long after the crowd had thinned. By the time the night ended, we were standing on the curb, and she was looking at me, that same spark in her eyes. How about we make it official? A real date, not a we met at a party kind of thing. I remember staring at her for a second, still not entirely sure why she was interested. But then I agreed. Of course I agreed. I'd never been good at saying no to something like that. So we set a date. And it felt like, for the first time in a long time, things were moving forward. A few months later, we found ourselves sitting on the front porch of a house we bought together. It was a quiet place in a quiet suburb. Nothing fancy, but solid. We pooled our savings, took out a mortgage, and made it work. The house was small, but big enough for both of us. And it felt like a fresh start. Marla was on the rise. She went from principal to assistant superintendent faster than I could keep track. She had that way about her. The confidence, the charm, that made people follow her, made them believe in her vision. It was like she was always one step ahead, always thinking about the next move. Meanwhile, I was still fixing AC units and boilers at the university. I didn't mind it. It paid the bills, kept things stable. I could tinker with my invention in the garage after work, let the rhythm of the day settle in. But Marla wasn't content with just stability. She wanted more, always more. Her career skyrocketed, and she started making it clear that she wanted us to live like a power couple. Dinner parties at the house, drinks with her colleagues. The first few were okay. I got along with everyone, smiled, made small talk. But eventually, it started to feel like I was just a prop. You need to start thinking bigger, she told me one night while we were rearranging the living room furniture for the 100th time. I was kneeling down, pushing a heavy chair into place. What do you mean? She was standing, hands on her hips, looking at the space like she was planning its future. A newer car, better furniture. Maybe a membership at that private club. You can't keep working at the university forever. You're not going to get anywhere with that. I stopped pushing the chair. I'm fine with it. I like it. It's stable. Stable doesn't cut it anymore, Matt. She turned, her eyes flashing. Don't you want to be someone people look up to? I stood up and wiped my hands on my jeans. I'm already someone people can count on. She didn't respond at first, just stared at me like she was deciding whether or not to push further. Then she smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was businesslike, a little too calculated. I just think we need to keep upgrading. You know, keep up with the times. That's when I started feeling the distance between us. It wasn't just the dinners and the talk of upgrades. It was how she started seeing everything as a way to climb higher. The house wasn't just a home, it was a stepping stone. The car wasn't just for getting around. It was a status symbol. Her parents were another story. They warmed up to me eventually, after seeing the house, after hearing how reliable I was. But it was never quite enough. I could tell they thought I wasn't living up to their standards, like I was still playing it safe. But I wasn't about to pretend to be someone I wasn't. Meanwhile, I kept working on my invention in the garage, the water purification valve. I didn't tell her about it much, kept it under wraps. I filed for a patent and kept it quiet, figuring if anything came of it, it'd be on my terms, not hers. I didn't need her to tell me how to dream bigger, but it didn't matter. The more she pushed for the next level, the more I felt like I was just holding on. She was charging ahead, and I was stuck behind, trying to stay grounded in a life I knew was slipping out of my hands. It started with a memo that felt like it came from nowhere. The university was cutting back, restructuring. A nice way to say they were laying people off. I wasn't immune. They demoted me to part-time, slashing my hours, and just like that, I was a shell of what I'd been. The work was still there, boilers, air conditioning units, all the systems no one thought about until they broke. But now it was barely enough to pay the bills. I started picking up side gigs fixing home units just to scrape by. It hit me harder than I expected, losing the steady paycheck. And as things slid further down, I felt it in the way Marla started to look at me. There was no more playful teasing about my work. Now it was just cold. "You need to take this seriously, Matt," she said one night, sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through a stack of glossy real estate magazines. She didn't even look up. "You're not going to make it if you keep living in the past." I was sitting across from her, a wrench in my hand, tightening something on an old air conditioner I'd just fixed. I was trying to ignore the way her voice sounded, the way she was drifting away from me with every word. "I'm making it. I've got things in motion. Just give it some time," I said, more to convince myself than her. She scoffed, shaking her head, still not meeting my eyes. "Things in motion? You've been tinkering with that water valve for years, Matt. When's it actually going to turn into something? You're just spinning your wheels." I set the wrench down on the table. "I'm working on it. I've filed for the patent. It's not nothing, Marla." She paused, finally glancing at me, her lips pressed tight. "Stop dreaming, okay? Just stop. Grow up." Those words hit harder than the cut in my hours. They stung like they'd been waiting for a moment to slip out, to mark the point where we stopped being on the same side. She was right. Dreaming was easier than dealing with the reality of what was happening. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I spent the next few days buried in my garage, tuning up the valve design, tweaking the calculations. It felt like the only thing I had control over anymore. Then, just as I was starting to think maybe this whole thing was a lost cause, something came through. A commercial plumbing supplier reached out, interested in buying exclusive rights to the valve. They liked the design, saw potential for it in large-scale municipal projects. My heart hammered when I read the email. I called Nate the next day, my old friend from back in the day when I had big ideas but no direction. He was a patent broker, the kind of guy who knew how to move fast in a world that didn't care about small players. "Hey, Nate, I need some help with something," I said, pacing around the garage, trying to stay calm. "You got something real, Matt?" he asked, his voice low, professional. "I think so. The valve, it's got a shot. But I need to make sure it's locked down, right? I'm not messing this up." He chuckled, but it wasn't mocking. "Well, if you're serious, we'll get it done. I've got connections. You just need to tell me what you want." And that was it. We started making moves. Planning. Quietly, behind closed doors. I told Marla a little about it, but I didn't get into the details. Not yet. At home, things were shifting. Marla kept pushing me, trying to get me to see the bigger picture the way she did. But it was hard to care when all I wanted was to focus on what mattered. Fixing things. Building something that could actually change things. She didn't see it the way I did. It wasn't about status or the next upgrade. It was about the quiet work, the long nights in the garage, the patience it took to build something real. But in the back of my mind, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be stuck forever. Even if Marla couldn't see it, even if she was looking down at me, I was going to make something of myself. The patent was my chance, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. Things started to shift in ways I couldn't ignore. Marla was spending more and more time away from home, off to conferences or networking events. I didn't ask for details, I knew better. But the truth was, it didn't feel like she was working on her career anymore. It felt like she was working on something else. I noticed the little things first. She'd be gone late, leaving the house empty when I came in from another night of fixing broken air conditioners. When she did come home, it was like she was a different person. Her outfits were sharper, nicer fabrics, heels that clicked a little louder on the hardwood. The perfume she wore lingered longer, heavy in the air. I'd catch her on the phone in the evenings, stepping outside to talk in a lower, tighter voice. And when she came back inside, her tone was colder, more distant. "You're a good man, Matt," she said one night. her fingers drumming on the kitchen counter as she stood over a plate of half-eaten dinner. You're not built for ambition. And I need more. I stared at her, waiting for her to keep going, but she didn't. She just looked at me, like she expected me to understand, to agree, maybe. But I didn't know how to respond. You're saying I'm not enough? She sighed, running a hand through her hair like I'd just asked something obvious. I'm saying you don't have the drive I need. Not anymore. I was quiet for a long time, holding on to the edges of my frustration. It felt like we were sliding into a place where she wasn't really seeing me anymore, where everything I did, no matter how hard I worked, was just not enough. Then one night, when she came back from another one of her events, she suggested counseling. But not for us. Not for our marriage. For me. Maybe you should go, she said, looking at me like I was a problem she couldn't solve on her own. To figure out your self-worth. Counseling? I asked, shocked. You're serious? Just think about it. Maybe you're too stuck in your ways. Maybe it'll help you figure out what you really want, what you're really capable of. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to snap, tell her that I wasn't broken, that I didn't need fixing. But something in me told me to just walk away. She wasn't listening anyway. A few days later, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. I was sitting in the living room, trying to unwind after another long day, when I heard her laughing softly from the kitchen, talking to someone on the phone. Charisse, I assumed, her work bestie. She's just not cutting it anymore, Marla said, her voice light and almost teasing. I'm thinking about trading him in for something newer, someone who actually fits the picture. My stomach turned. I froze, not knowing whether to stay hidden or walk out. But I didn't have to do anything. Marla hung up, came into the living room, and said, I think it's time we made a change. That night, when I came into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, I found the divorce papers on the table. The words blurred together, but I saw the numbers, the demands. The house, the car, alimony, everything. It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about ownership. She'd gone to her father's old firm, made sure everything was locked down. A clean break. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? The paper felt heavy in my hands as I skimmed through the fine print. She'd even planned for how the assets would be divided. Her lawyer had thought of everything, down to the smallest detail. Marla stood at the door, watching me. Her face was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes. Not guilt, not even regret, just finality. You'll get a fair deal, Matt, she said, her voice soft but firm. I've made sure of that. We're better off apart. I couldn't argue. I knew this wasn't just her making a decision. It was her taking control. She'd made up her mind long ago. And somewhere, deep down, I knew I had too. I didn't want to think about the divorce. I just wanted it over with. But it wasn't going to be that simple. I needed someone to help me make sense of everything. Someone who could see through the mess of legal jargon Marla had already set in motion. I thought of Miss Ledbetter, the retired judge who handled my mother's estate when she passed away. She was sharp, no nonsense, and had a reputation for getting people out of tight spots without getting lost in the drama. When I walked into her office, she was sitting behind a desk, calm, the kind of stillness that made you trust her right away. She looked at the divorce papers I handed her, scanning them with a practiced eye. The paper felt like lead in my hands, but she didn't seem fazed. Let's see what we're working with, she muttered under her breath. I waited while she flipped through the documents, her glasses perched on the end of her nose, her lips moving slightly as she read. It was the silence that got to me, the kind of silence that made me question every move I'd ever made. Was I stupid for not seeing it coming? Or was I just too damn trusting? Finally, she put the papers down and looked at me, her face unreadable at first. Then, she smiled. It was one of those smiles that told me she'd already figured it all out. She thinks you're cornered, she said, her voice soft but with a knowing edge. Let's give her what she wants. I blinked, not sure I heard her right. What do you mean? You'll give her the house, the car, the alimony, everything, she said, her voice steady, like she was reading a shopping list. But in exchange, we add a clause, a full financial release. She can't come after you again, no matter what happens with your income in the future. It's over, Matt. For good. It sounded too simple, too clean. But then I saw the way Miss Ledbetter's eyes were sharp on me, and I realized she was right. Marla wanted everything, and she wanted it now. If I gave it to her, I'd have nothing left to fight for, but I'd also be free. No more stress, No more threats. I didn't need the house, or the car, or any of it. What I needed was a clean break. We can make it airtight, she said, as if reading my mind. She's in a rush to claim it all. Let her. You walk away with peace. I nodded. Let's do it. We spent the next few hours drafting the agreement. It felt almost too easy, but Miss Ledbetter's confidence was infectious. I didn't care any more about the house or the car. I wasn't even sure I cared about the money. I cared about the peace. A few days later, I handed the agreement over to Marla's lawyer. I watched her sign it, her expression smug as she looked at me, almost triumphant. It was like she'd already won. I didn't care. I'd already won, too. The second she signed the papers, she posted a picture online, one of her standing in front of her new car, all smiles. Fresh start. She captioned it, the words glowing with self-satisfaction. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly to myself. She was posting her new life before I even moved out. But I wasn't about to engage. I didn't need to. She'd taken everything she wanted, and I was done. As I packed up my things, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already lighter. That weight I'd carried for so long, the guilt, the frustration, the fear, was gone. It wasn't my problem anymore. I moved into a small apartment above a florist shop downtown. The rent was cheap, and the flowers kept the place smelling nice. Roses, mostly, with a hint of lavender. It was quiet, away from everything, and it felt like the kind of place someone could disappear to. That's exactly what I needed, a place where I could breathe, where the world couldn't reach me as easily. I didn't have much with me, just a few bags of clothes, a mattress on the floor, and a small kitchen that I used more for storage than cooking. It was all I needed. 3 months after the divorce papers were signed, after I'd filed everything away and moved on, my patent for the water valve sold for $142 million to a municipal infrastructure supplier. I almost couldn't believe it when Nate called me with the news. My heart thudded in my chest as I sat on the edge of that old mattress, staring at the wall. $142 million. That's real money, Matt, Nate said, his voice tight with excitement. We're talking real change here. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted to celebrate. But there was another part of me, quiet, distant, that knew nothing would really change. Not in any way that mattered. Nate wasted no time. He put me in touch with a finance lawyer who set up a trust and holding company for me. All of it was airtight, nothing in my name, nothing that could come back on me later. The money was untouchable by anyone, including Marla, and I didn't care. I didn't need her or anyone else to claim what I'd built. I brought in a small team to help manage things. Nate, of course, was the first person I called. He'd brokered the deal for me, so he had a stake in the game. He knew how to handle the money side of things. Then there was a former engineer I'd met on a job, a guy named Mike who knew his way around systems better than most people, and Miss Ledbetter's niece, Rachel, to handle the administrative stuff. Quiet, competent, no fuss. We kept everything under wraps. No press, no interviews, no big splash. If I'd learned anything from the years I spent working on the valve, it was that most people were too quick to chase headlines. I didn't need any of that. What mattered was what I'd built, what I'd secured for myself and the people I cared about. I still fixed things on weekends, mostly out of habit. I liked it, the quiet of it, the feeling of solving something with my hands, of making something work again that had been broken. It kept me grounded, kept me from floating too far out into the world that was suddenly shifting around me. I didn't need to buy a new car, didn't need a mansion or a new wardrobe. I didn't need anything to prove anything to anyone. Peace settled into me like a weight lifting off my chest. No more pretending, no more constant hustle to keep up with a life that never felt like mine. There was just work, real work, and the freedom to do what I wanted with it. It was simple. I liked it that way. Every time I went out to fix someone's AC, every time I tinkered with the small details of the business in the back of my mind, I was reminded of why I'd done all of this in the first place. Not for the money, not for the attention, but because I could make something real, something that mattered. I wasn't chasing anyone's idea of success anymore. I'd found my own. I should have known it wasn't over. I guess I was naive to think I could just walk away and have the past stay buried, but months later, the whispers started. It began with Charisse, Marla's work bestie. At first, it was just some innocuous social media comments, nothing direct, but I could tell she was paying closer attention to my posts. One time, she liked a picture of my old truck in front of my apartment. I didn't think much of it. Then came the mutual friends, asking odd questions in the grocery store or at the gym, how things were going, if I was happy, if everything was really settled. That's when I knew it wasn't just curiosity. It was reconnaissance. A few weeks after that, Marla showed up in a brand new luxury car. The kind you see on billboards, sleek and out of place in this part of town. I didn't need to ask how she could afford it. I knew it wasn't hers, not really. I saw her post pictures of it on Instagram, her leaning on the hood with a smug smile, captioning it with something about leveling up. Then the quotes started, snide, passive-aggressive stuff that she posted online, tagging me just enough for anyone paying attention to know who she was talking about. Some people just don't understand what success looks like. One of the posts read, "Better to leave behind the past and start fresh." It didn't take long for her to make her move. One morning, I opened the door to find a legal notice sitting on the front step. I don't even know why I bothered to look at it immediately, but I did. It was from Marla's lawyer, a flashy downtown litigator with a reputation for going after anyone with deep pockets. The letter claimed I'd hidden assets during the divorce, that I'd deceived her about the full value of the patent. She wanted half of the $142 million and back alimony, recalculated based on my new income. My stomach dropped when I read it. She was accusing me of fraud, of withholding marital value, and the new lawyer had all sorts of legal jargon in there, designed to intimidate. Her lawyer even included a timeline showing how they believed I'd been secretly building the valve business while we were still married, as if I'd pulled the whole thing out of thin air. I didn't know what to feel first, anger, confusion, or just plain exhaustion. It was like she couldn't let go of what she'd lost, and now she was trying to take it all back. I called Miss Ledbetter. I needed her advice, and I needed it fast. When I explained the situation, I could practically hear her smiling on the other end of the phone. "I told you she'd come back," she said, her voice smooth but with an edge of amusement. "You're in the clear, Matt. Don't worry." We met at her office the next day, and I handed her the filing. She skimmed it quickly, then laughed. "This is weak," she said, shaking her head. "They're going to try to reopen everything based on an accusation? Please. We'll bury them in the paperwork they ignored." She pulled out a file from her drawer, one that had been gathering dust, I assumed, and spread it out on the table. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a clause in the divorce settlement we'd signed months ago. "This is airtight. There's no way they're getting past this. You were transparent. They were too quick to grab at everything they could, and now they're scrambling." She had a way of breaking things down that made me feel stupid for even being worried. But it was a relief, too, like someone had finally handed me the playbook. "We'll file a motion to dismiss," she said, tapping the papers with her pen. "This lawyer of hers doesn't even know what he's up against. You're not cornered. They'll have to prove you hid anything, and they won't." "Do you think she'll back down?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. "Marla." Miss Ledbetter raised an eyebrow. "She's used to winning. She won't like it when she sees the depth of this. But if she wants to keep playing, she's going to get buried in her own mess." And just like that, the panic I'd been feeling started to fade. Miss Ledbetter was confident, and she had the skills to back it up. She had a way of making you feel like the world wasn't so big after all, that you could actually stand up to whatever came your way. "Let's do this," I said, finally feeling like I could breathe again. We moved forward with the motion to dismiss. Marla could try to chase the money all she wanted. This time, I wasn't going to make it easy. The courtroom felt colder than I expected, like all the air had been sucked out and replaced with something thick, heavy. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach as I sat there, staring straight ahead. Marla was there, of course, her lawyer by her side. She looked polished, too polished, actually, like she'd been crafted for the occasion. Her outfit was sleek, sharp, and expensive, and she had this air of confidence about her that made me wonder how many times she'd walked into rooms like this and walked out with exactly what she wanted. Her lawyer wasn't as put together. He was arrogant, though, spinning his arguments with a kind of cocky assurance that made me want to roll my eyes. He stood up first, speaking fast, throwing out legal jargon that didn't mean much to me, but seemed to impress the judge. His whole case rested on one thing: anticipated wealth. He argued that I defrauded Marla by not disclosing the potential future value of my invention. "The defendant," he said, pointing at me with a hand that almost felt theatrical, "had the foresight to patent a product that would become immensely valuable. He knew, and he hid it." I didn't say anything. My hands were clenched on the table, but I knew this was just noise. His case was shaky, but I could see Marla's face. She was staring at me, not with anger, but something else, something cold. She was trying to will the outcome into being. But Miss Ledbetter wasn't rattled. She stood up slowly, with that calm authority I had come to trust. "Your Honor," she said, addressing the judge directly, her voice steady, but with the sharpness of someone who knew exactly how to play the game. She didn't rush, didn't waste words. "I'm going to walk you through this step by step." The judge, an older man with glasses perched on his nose, nodded and leaned forward, clearly ready to listen. Miss Ledbetter laid it out, everything. The timeline, the filing date, the trust structure, and that bulletproof clause. Each point hit like a hammer. She didn't just talk, she showed. She had a quiet way of making the complex seem simple, and when she read the signed waiver aloud, the room went dead silent. The plaintiff, Miss Ledbetter continued, signed this waiver with full knowledge of the terms. It explicitly releases any claim on future income and acknowledges that the assets were disclosed accurately and completely. "This is final, Your Honor." I could see Marla stiffen in her chair. Her lawyer's face started to shift from arrogance to something else. I could feel the pressure building as the judge's eyes flicked back and forth between the documents and the room. When Miss Ledbetter finished, there was a long pause. The judge sat back in his chair, fingers tapping against the wood, his face unreadable. And then, finally, he spoke. "Based on the evidence presented," he said, his voice firm, "this case is dismissed with prejudice." I exhaled. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for hours. But the judge wasn't done. He looked at Marla's lawyer and added, "And I'm ordering a counterclaim for harassment and legal fees to be approved. The defendant is entitled to the costs of this frivolous action." The words hit like a slap. Marla's lawyer sputtered, trying to say something, but the judge just waved him off, his decision final. Marla didn't react immediately. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, her face a mask. But as the gavel came down, I saw her move. She stood up, her heels clicking sharply on the floor as she grabbed her things. There was no "thank you" to the judge, no acknowledgement of the ruling. Just a smooth, almost rehearsed exit. And then, as she walked out, I realized this was it. This was the last time I'd see her. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had already won, in her mind. But this time, I didn't need her to see me. I'd won my piece, and that was all I needed. I didn't need to say anything more to her. I had nothing left to prove, nothing left to fight for. So, I wrote one letter and sent it by mail, just like that. Simple. No drama. "Thanks for leaving fast. Peace is worth more than the house." That was it. Short, clean, and final. I didn't need to fill the page with words I didn't mean. I didn't need to explain. I was done. 3 days later, the phone started ringing. I saw her name on the screen, and I knew what it was before I even picked it up. The first 3 calls went unanswered. I let them ring out, let the silence settle back in around me. It was my silence now. No more interruptions. But on the 4th call, I answered. "Matt," she said, and her voice was different. Smaller. There was no confidence behind it, no smugness. It was shaky, unsure, like someone who was standing on thin ice and knew it was about to crack. "Hi, Marla," I said, keeping my voice even calm. She hesitated for a moment before speaking again. I didn't know what I was doing. I acted out of fear. I was afraid of losing everything. I thought I could control it. Control you. I wasn't surprised. It wasn't new, not really. But hearing her admit it, hearing her sound like she wasn't the person I'd known, made something in me shift. "I'm sorry," she continued, her voice quieter now. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was wrong." I listened to her for a while, the words coming in a rush now that she had finally cracked. But I didn't feel the anger I thought I would. I didn't feel the bitterness, either. I just felt tired. "I'm sorry too," I said, not because I was trying to comfort her, but because it was the truth. "But I can't do this anymore. Not with you. Not with this." There was a long pause. I could almost hear her thoughts, could feel her wrestling with what to say next. But I knew. It didn't matter anymore. "Goodbye, Marla," I said quietly. Some bridges burned clean. I hung up before she could respond, before she could say anything else. She never called again. Charisse never called again. The silence that followed was the real gift. The kind of silence that settled over me like the world had finally exhaled. The kind of peace I hadn't even known I was missing. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without the weight of all the chaos hanging over me. The phone didn't ring. No one knocked on my door. It was just quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I slept. No tossing, no turning. Just deep, uninterrupted sleep. I kept the apartment above the flower shop, the same one I'd moved into when everything else had burned to the ground. It wasn't much, just a small space with a mattress on the floor and a few boxes of things I didn't even need. But it was mine. Every morning, the scent of roses drifted up through the floorboards, filling the room with a softness I didn't know I needed until it was there. It reminded me that some things were simple, and I could hold on to that. I ran a quiet company now. Nothing flashy, no press or big investor meetings. Just a small, loyal team working to build sustainable water systems. We didn't change the world overnight, but we did something that mattered. I was no longer fixing boilers and air conditioners. Now, I was building things that lasted. Things that made a difference. I never bought a mansion. I didn't need one. I didn't buy a car I didn't need, either. My finances were protected, the trust set up, and everything locked down. I didn't care about appearances anymore. My peace was intact, and that was worth more than any luxury car or big house. My days were mine again. I got up when I felt like it, worked when I needed to, and spent my evenings doing whatever I wanted. Sometimes I thought about that rooftop party, how I fell for a woman who made me feel like I belonged, like I was a part of something important. I'd never really fit in before, and when she looked at me, it felt like maybe I could. But now, I didn't need to belong to anyone. Not her, not anyone. I built things now. I fixed what mattered. And I didn't explain myself to people who only ever cared about the packaging, the shiny stuff on the outside. I was done with that. I was done with people who only saw the surface. The real work was done in the quiet. And that was enough.